In addition to linking to external pages and sites, anchors allow us to jump to specific sections within a document as well. These are known as fragment identifiers and can be extremely helpful in enhancing your site's navigation. So to explore that concept, we're going to use two files, fragments.htm and destination.htm, both found in the 05_04 directory. It's a little bit easier if we preview these in the browser so you can kind of see what's going on with them. So this is fragments.htm. You can see that beneath the headline, we have some links we're going to create here. We're going to create a link to section 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to link to section 2 of the destination page. And then finally, we're going to link out to the HTML specification in the W3C. Basically, fragment identifiers let us jump to sections on the same page. So here we have section 1. If we scroll down a little bit, we have section 2. And then down a little bit further, we have section 3. This is extremely helpful when you have a lot of information on a page and you have a lot of vertical scrolling for things like frequently asked questions, glossaries. It's pretty common to find these types of links that let you sort of jump down to the page. Now, they also allow you to jump to specific sections of other pages as well. So if we go to the destination.htm, preview that in the browser, we can see that this one doesn't have the navigation, but it does have 3 different sections, and we want to be able to navigate to a specific one. So with that in mind, let's go back to fragments. And there's basically a 2-step process in dealing with fragment identifiers. One is you have to have an ID on the page. So they jump to the ID attribute that you specify in the link. So what we're going to do is I'm going to scroll down in my content. You'll notice that at the very top of the page in this H1, it has an ID of top. And as I scroll through this, I can see that the H3 for section 1 has an ID of 1. Section 2 has an ID of 2. And you might anticipate that section 3 would have an ID of 3, but it doesn't. And that's so that we can practice putting it there. So what you want to do is on the H3 for section 3, you want to add an ID attribute, and we'll just go ahead and give it a value of 3. That seems to make sense. I like making IDs short so they're easy to remember. You don't want any white space in them, so no spaces, and it's best to keep them as short as possible to make them a little bit easier to remember. Capitalization matters as well. So I like leaving them either all lowercase or camel casing them if I have to. Okay, so now we need to make links to each of those sections, 1, 2, and 3. So to do that, I'm going to use our normal anchor element, but the difference is in the href attribute. So instead of linking to a specific page or resource, here we need to link to the ID. And to do that, we use the octothorpe character, which is sometimes called the pound character, and then you follow that with the ID. So if we're linking to section 1, I can see that the ID is 1, so I use the word 1. And that's exactly how that works. I'm going to give this a title, and the title is going to be section 1. I'm a firm believer in doing as little work as possible when you're coding. So you can see I surrounded that with a link. What I'm going to do is just copy this and then paste it around section 2 and section 3. So what I'm going to do is #2 for that, #3 for that one. And then I have to remember, this is really dangerous because I pasted them without doing the closing link tag first. So you want to make sure that you close those anchor elements, both of these as well. So essentially what we've got here now is we have links created around the text for sections 1, 2, and 3. And I need to update the titles as 2. So 2 there and 3 here. And again, what makes this technique is a 2-step process. You have an ID attribute on an element, in this case, ID equals 1, and then the link links to it by using the octothorpe or the hash character here, followed by the ID value. So if I save this and preview this in my browser, notice that when I click on section 3, it jumps down to section 3. If I click to section 2, it jumps down to section 2. Now, when I click on these, you're going to see that when I click on, say, section 1, for example, it goes all the way up to the top. But when I click on section 3, it doesn't go all the way up to the top. That's because it scrolls down as far as it possibly can. It can't get any further down. Now, you also may notice that I'm clicking the back button in order to take me back up to the top. In terms of usability, this isn't the best thing in the world. If you're going to give your users the ability to jump down to the bottom of something, you need to give them the ability to jump back up. So because of the fact that our top level header, this H1, already has an ID of top, we can create a link at the bottom very easily by just going down to the bottom. And I'm going to create a brand new paragraph down here. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a link as well. And in the link, I'm going to href link that to the top. Now you can see why I like using these short fragment identifiers. We'll give it a title of back to the top. And then for link text, we'll just click back to top, close the link, then close the paragraph. If I save this, go back in the browser now, if I click down to the bottom of the page, I have a link back to the top. It takes me back up to the top of the page. So for usability purposes, that's not a bad thing. Now, in this instance, we've been linking to page regions that were within this page. What if you know of a page region in another page that you want to link to? Let's say, for example, that somebody's written a blog post and you want to jump right to the blog post and not have to deal with the rest of the site. Well, in order to do that, all you need to know is the fragment identifier for that section. So if I go into destination, for example, and I scroll through this code, I can see that I have an ID of 1 for section 1, an ID of 2 for section 2, and an ID of 3 for section 3. So in order to link to these sections, all I need to know is the name of the file that I'm linking to and the section that I want to link to. So in Fragments, I scroll back up to the series of links that we're making. I can see that I need to link to section 2 of the destination.htm page. So I'm going to surround section 2 with a link here, and I'm going to link that to the page destination.htm, but I'm going to add to this my identifier. So right after the HTM, I'm going to type in #2. So what this is telling is it's saying, hey, navigate to destination.htm and find the second section. We're going to go ahead and give that a title, and I'm just going to give this a title of destination. And then I need to remember to close my link tag. Right now I'm going to save that, go back out to the browser, and now when I click on the link to section 2 of the destination page, it not only takes me to the destination page, but jumps me down to the section 2 as well. Well, that's pretty easy to do if you know the section because you've created it. But what if you're going to an outside website and you still want to jump to a specific section? Well, let's say I go to the HTML5 specification from the W3C. So here I am on their site, the w3.org. I've navigated to the HTML5 specification, and I'm basically looking at the table of contents. Now, if I scroll through the table of contents, and I just happen to know where this is, I'm going to go down to section 5. And in section 5, right down here, you can see I've been to it already, 5.6.9, navigating to a fragment identifier. There's really not a lot of information in the HTML5 specification about fragment IDs. This is about the only thing that you can find. And if you click on it, it's really some confusing information about the browser's reaction, its navigation, if you will, as it scrolls to a fragment identifier. So you're not going to get a whole lot out of this. The whole idea of doing this, however, is to see that when I click on this, the URL up top in the address bar is telling me all I need to know. Notice it already has a pound here, scroll-to frag ID. So we're seeing in this instance, they're using a fragment identifier to navigate to this specific section. Now, if you don't necessarily know what the fragment identifier is, you can always take a look at the source code of the page as well. Notice that if I click inside this header and I right-click and tell it to inspect this element, you can see I've actually got a couple of different IDs that I could use. I have the ID for the H4 right here, scroll to frag ID. That's what we're seeing here. But we also have this ID that's a navigate-frag ID. So I could really use either of those. I think I'll just stick with the one that they're using because this makes it very easy for me to come up to the URL and just copy this. So I'm going to go back into brackets, and where it says fragment identifiers as defined by the W3C, I'm going to surround the words fragment identifiers with a link. So I'm going to do the anchor element. I'll do an href. And the href, I'm just going to paste in what I copied online from the W3C because that's going to be way too hard for me to type in. And then I'll do a title attribute, and I'll type in W3C fragment identifiers. Close that, and then you got to remember to close the link. So I'm going to save that, preview that in my browser. And now if I click on this link, fragment identifiers as defined by the W3C, it jumps right to that section. Perfect. Now, one last thing that I want to mention in terms of usability, as helpful as these fragment identifiers can be when you plan out your site navigation, you really do need to be thoughtful when you're using them because often it's not really apparent to the user where they've jumped to, which can be a little disorienting if they're not used properly. So as you plan the use of fragment identifiers, make sure that you eliminate any potential confusion that they could cause to your users.